Good morning, everyone. Welcome this morning to our first interim joint committee on state government and state and local government, and also elections and constitutional amendments. We welcome all of the members here today. We welcome all of the guests that are with us this morning, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Just one thing, if you have your cell phone, please silence your cell phone at this time, if you don't mind. And we will begin, and we will have the roll call first, and then after that we do have a few new members that we're going to introduce. So would you please call the roll at this time? Thank you.
Okay. Senator Berg. Present. Senator Elkins. Present. Senator Harper Angel. Here. Senator Mays Bledsoe. Senator McDaniel. Senator Nemes.
Present.
Senator Storm. Senator Thayer.
Here.
Senator Wheeler.
Here.
Senator Williams. Here. Representative All.
Here.
Representative Bojanowski.
Here.
Representative Bowling.
Here.
Representative Branscombe. Representative Callaway. Representative Chester Burton.
Here.
Representative Decker. Representative Duvall.
Here.
Representative Gooch. Here. Representative Graham.
Here.
Representative Heath.
Here.
Representative Heverin. Representative Herron. Representative Hodgson. Here. Representative Huff.
Here.
Representative Imes.
Here.
Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative Cook. Representative Derek Lewis. Representative Scott Lewis. Representative Maddox.
Here.
Representative Moser. Representative Rawlings.
Here.
Representative Raymond.
Here.
Representative Tate. Representative Tipton. Representative Weber.
Here.
Representative Williams.
Here.
Representative Witten.
Here.
Representative Senator Mills.
Here.
Representative Bratcher.
Here.
Representative Hale.
Here. We do have a quorum this morning, and again, I want to say to each and every one, welcome today. We're glad you're here on this first interim meeting of our joint committees. I'm going to turn it over first to Senator Mills.
Our third senator.
I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Senator Greg Elkins. Senator Elkins, we welcome you to the legislature, and we also welcome you to this committee. And I want to add a personal note. Senator Elkins is my senator, and I'm glad to have him as my new senator from the 28th District. And Senator Elkins, we welcome you today. I'm going to give you just a minute if you'd like to address the body for just a moment in those, and just we want to give you that opportunity as being a new member, and just take a moment, please. Introduce yourself to everyone.
Just say look forward to working with this committee, the Senate and the House, and I'm excited about the opportunity, and thank you, Mr. Hale, for that introduction.
That's quite all right, and again, thank you for being with us today, and look forward to working with you. And I know your Senate members, as I was at your swearing in a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I know they were very excited about that. We have three new, well, actually, we only have one new representative to the committee. Representative Chad All is joining us today, and Representative All, we welcome you to this committee. Representative Witten and Representative Williams were a part of the State Government Committee during the session, but they are joining us now as their first times on the interim committee, so we welcome them this morning. Does anyone have any guests that they would like to introduce? Senator Thayer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over here to the far right, I'd like to introduce Sydney Zakich. She is going to be a junior at Scott County High School. She's shadowing me today, which really means she's shadowing Rachel Volk, which is a better deal for her. Sydney is a part of our law and justice program at our excellent vocational technical school, Elkhorn Crossing in Scott County, and she has a great deal of interest in learning about state government. So she's here today to do just that in this committee. Thank you, and welcome, Sydney. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Let's make her welcome this morning with us today. Is there anyone else that has a guest that you would like to recognize before we proceed? There being no other guest, I do need to back up and make an announcement. I was not aware of this. We want to recognize representatives in remembrance of our colleague, Representative Swan. Thank you very much, and we want to pass again along our condolences to Representative Swan and his family. He was only with us a short time. I got to know him rather well during the session, and he was a very kind gentleman.
Of great help to us. So this is the look at the boards, and I'll take a step back and say that if you went back to April of members, so see, he had a 1/3 representation, but they were 2/3 of the assets and 2/3 of the members, and the solution was House Bill 484, which created this structure. Representative Weber, sitting over here, was the architect of that. We worked closely with him on getting it put together. It was extremely complex, but we resulted in having the CERBS board. There's 9 members, 3 are elected, 6 are appointed, off of a list provided by CAECO, League of Cities, and the School Board Association. And on the right side, we also have 9, 3 elected and 6 appointed by the governor. And 4 of those on each of those boards form our board, our 8-person board. So it's the CERS, and it's the 2 board chairs, it's the 2 investment chairs, it's 2 trustees, 1 elected and 1 appointed, and they form the 8. So there's a lot of moving parts, let's say. We had 83 meetings last year between boards and committees. So the administration of what was formerly KRS moving into KPPA and the CERS and KRS, much more complex, many more committees. And I'll say we're managing it, I think, pretty effectively. Employers. In K, we have 325 employers and 33,000 members. That I will tell you this, there are people that are double counted, so the 33,000 isn't 33,000 heads, but if somebody is in a P1 agency and also in a health department, they're counted in both, so there's some duplication. But top 5 are P1 state agencies, health departments, regional mental health, universities, and non-P1, and that would tend to be rape crisis centers and domestic violence, and so there's 237 that fall in that category, and 99% of the members, 32,920. And then finally, a number of much smaller agencies, sometimes 1 or 2 employees. CERS, they have 1,122 agencies. They have 89,000, again, double counting. Boards of education are number 1. That would be largely non-teaching positions, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and so forth. And then on through fiscal court, cities, the 2 urban governments, Lexington and Louisville. And so we are collecting money from 1,500 agencies, and we have 1,500 reporting officials who have to do the calculations and get us the numbers, and it's a job that turns over rapidly. And people talk about Dave Ramsey's principle, take care of your small debts first. That's what this is. This is a Dave Ramsey move to say state police is small, and dollars, a limited amount of dollars can have a huge impact. Yes. And then finally, in 23 and 24, we're going to get $240 million additional appropriations each year, and that's going to have great impact. We appreciate it. And I'm done, except to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Eager, for your presentation. Very good and very informative. A few weeks ago, when myself and Senator Mills was talking about our first meeting, we thought it would be good to have you come and just share with us where we're at and where we have been and hopefully where we're going to get to on this. I know we do have some questions. Maybe I have a couple questions, but I will go ahead and first I'm going to go to Senator Thayer, who has the first question or comment. Senator Thayer, you proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David touched on it, but I would like to recap for some of the newer members how we got to this positive trajectory. In 2013, I was the sponsor of Senate Bill 2. Back then, things were very different. There was a Beshear in the governor's office, but he was actually one who invited us down to meet with them from time to try to find bipartisan solutions because the House at the time was controlled by the Democrats. We had been working for many, many years on pension reform for KRS and CERS, and we'd had a task force that had met throughout 2012 that I co-chaired with former Representative Mike Cherry to come up with recommendations to try to stem the bleeding that was happening, particularly at KRS. There were three things of significance that came out of Senate Bill 2. Number one, we removed the taxpayers from the liability of paying for public employee pensions while creating the new hybrid cash balance plan that David mentioned. And it is called a hybrid cash balance plan because it is a hybrid. It has elements of both a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution plan, while again taking the taxpayers off the hook for the liability that David mentioned. Also in the bill, and this is significant, it became law that the General Assembly is required to fully fund the actuarially recommended contribution to KRS. And now I guess you could call it the actuarially required contribution instead of recommended, because we are by law required to make that contribution, because there had been times throughout history that we didn't, the General Assembly at the time didn't make that contribution, and there were also some games being played with the amount of money that needed to be contributed, and so we thought we were contributing the right amount, but we actually weren't. And then the third thing, and I negotiated this with Governor Steve Beshear in his office, just him and me, was the creation of the Public Pension Oversight Board, which many of you are members of, which gives the General Assembly monthly updates on all of our pension systems, and I think has allowed and required that the General Assembly be more involved on a monthly basis on what's happening across all of our pension systems, so we don't get into a situation like we had been in previous years where we were reliant solely on the governor to make recommendations on how much money should be contributed to those systems. So you can see we're 10 years in almost. It's been 10 years since the bill passed, 9 years since it went into effect and Tier 3 was created. And we said then that it wouldn't happen overnight, that it would be 30 years to get us out of the very bad unfunded liability situation that we were in. But we had predicted, and when we collectively, I mean LRC staff, economists, the pension boards, this committee, members of the legislature, the governor at the time, we had predicted that we would be on a good trajectory, and here we are 10 years in, and we are on a very good trajectory. And it was a major accomplishment for the General Assembly. I want to compliment former Governor Steve Beshear for working with us in a collaborative fashion and for actually getting involved. We needed Democrat and Republican votes to pass the bill, and he got very involved and used the power of the governor's office to convince a number of Democrats to vote for the bill so that we could achieve passage, and then, of course, he signed the bill. It was a real shining moment in the General Assembly, and I'm happy that David is here today to give us this update. It is sort of like Groundhog Day for those of us who have been around in a while, because we get these reports every year, but the news is good. We are headed in the right direction. I'm going to defer to my colleague, Chairman McDaniel. Hopefully he'll talk a little bit about the specifics as A&R Committee Chairman about the dollars that have actually been appropriated, because he, along with Chairman Petrie, are the first line of defense to make sure that we are making those contributions. But you know, there used to be a narrative out there that the General Assembly in general, and Republicans in particular, were not strongly in favor of state employees, and I would say that is in fact incorrect. That is a false narrative, because if you look at the commitment that the General Assembly has made over the years through changing members and changing party control, there's a very consistent thread here, and that is the commitment that has been made to state employees for their retirement is very serious, and it's one of the first things that we have to check off in the budget planning process because of the law that was created under Senate Bill 2. So I just wanted to give a little history lesson here as someone who's used to chair this committee and has been on it for a long, long time, nearly 20 years. This is a very positive story. If you have state employees in your district, it's a positive story to tell them, and to the taxpayers who fund the majority of the public employee pensions, it's a good story to tell them as well, because it is fiscally responsible, the steps that we took and continue to take. So I hope that Chairman McDaniel is on the list. He can provide much more detail on the money, but the way we spend money is policy. For those of you who are new, the budget is the biggest policy document we ever spend, and the policies when it comes to state employees and their retirement have been very, very good for the last 10 years. So, Mr. Chairman and members, I appreciate your indulgence and for listening to my little history lesson. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. We will go ahead and defer to Senator McDaniel at this time, if you'd like to go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Leader Thayer for his comments there. Dave, for you, I think when you took the job as director, I was one of the first meetings that you had in the General Assembly, and I said, I commend you for accepting the job of the captain of the Titanic. And you did a much better job through the icebergs. And Director Chilton, I think that in one of our first meetings, I think it might have been with you and me and Governor Bevin, that my only request of the administration was please be honest about what's actually happening over at the pension systems, because we already knew that we had a problem. But unfortunately at that time we didn't realize how bad it was, because we were simply not getting good numbers out of the pension system. And you'll recall that one of the folks who was on the board at the time had been the personnel secretary for the previous Governor Beshear, when they were deliberately misstating payroll growth. Ultimately ended up as the Deputy Attorney General for the current governor and is currently residing in the federal penitentiary for bribery. But he had been on there and helped cook those books for many years. And what we found when we got underneath the hood was that the payroll growth assumptions were wrong, the assumed rate of return was wrong, the mortality rates were wrong, and overnight we went from $500 million a year in contributions to needing $1 billion a year in contributions, and that was a huge hit. And we worked very diligently to get to full funding, because it meant something very, very, very different in 2017 than it had meant in 2013. But the General Assembly and the governor stepped up and made those full funding contributions, and then ARC Plus, and then the normalizing of the costs, the additional contributions to SPRS. I mean, at this point, to the tune of billions of dollars of additional monies on top of a redefined actuarially required, or I guess we call it ADEC now. I even use old acronyms at this point. So whoever thought that I'd get to be one of the older people around this place, but I am. But I do thank you both and commend you both for your work, because there were a lot of difficult meetings, difficult moments, difficult times in these hallways as we got from A to Z. But Dave, you'll recall too, I think one of the conversations we had is that we were one blip in the stock market away from total insolvency of the pension funds, and the conversations were very serious at that point about if this goes into the courts, what actually is the inviolable contract? What does that mean? What benefits are and aren't guaranteed? And what does this mean for cuts elsewhere or tax increases? I mean, those were serious conversations. You'll also recall at that time, we did not have a budget reserve trust fund. Literally, when Director Chilton took over, I believe that the dollars in the account were somewhere barely north of zero. We've come a long way. But we come to a point where there might be some positive decisions to be made, and I want to ask your opinion. Obviously, insurance is north of 70% funded at this point, while the indemnity side is certainly down in the teens still. Would it give you more flexibility with the investments on that side if we allowed the trajectory to continue in health and tried to apply all new dollars to the payroll side until that balance gets healthier? Or what would the mechanics of that look like, or the decisions there?
I understand. We've actually had people say, why don't you move money from one trust to the other, which you can't do.
We can't do that. That's why I said new dollars.
Yeah. I think that's a good question for GRS. And we can pose some scenarios. It's probably more complicated than it sounds.
As everything is in your world.
And based on the last valuation, where we got a huge bump, based on Medicare premiums and experience and so forth, it could go the other way as well. And that's what we're cautious about. But I'll entertain a conversation with you and pull in GRS see what they can do to help us.
At your leisure. We certainly appreciate all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, could I say a couple of things?
Yes, go right ahead, sir.
First of all, I didn't recognize Representative Tipton, I don't think. If I did, I kind of ran
He is
past.
not with us today.
He is one of the 6 who really worked on House Bill 8. We had a committee of 6. Unfortunately, he's the only one that remains. Joe Gravis and Jerry Miller and so forth. And it was a bipartisan committee. And you wouldn't have known, when you walked in the room, you wouldn't have known they were focusing on let's figure out how to solve this problem like it. I also like to say, I got a quote from Warren Buffett maybe 7 or 8 years ago in a paper. He said, if I were a CEO running a company, I would not build anything or look to buy anything in Kentucky and other states that are similarly have severe liability issues in their retirement plans. I don't think he'd say that today. And I think as proof of that, when I first took the job, I got a call from Ryan Barrow within a couple of months. He said, can you come down and sit in on a conference call with Standard & Poor, who's doing our ratings? They want an update. And we had a number of those after that. In May of this year, Fitch's improved the rating from AA minus to AA on certain bonds here, and also a similar move on other bonds. It's probably the first time there's been a rating increase in I don't know how long. And it's a result of the kinds of things you saw on the 2013, 14, 15, 16. That I think they're being convinced that we're on the right track, and there's less liability today than there was before.
We have 3 more people for questions in this queue, and we need to be concluded by around 12:30 if possible. So we want to give Mr. Barnes plenty of time. Representative Bratcher, you may proceed, sir.
Okay, I just have 2 short questions. On the universities, you have 7 universities. I guess that's all the state universities on this as far as employers. And you have participating employees 1599, and this is the KERS, non-hazardous, I take it.
1,599.
Uh-huh.
Would that be the total?
Total participating employees.
Let me go back to that.
That's page 4. Just wondering if you can break that down a little bit. I don't think U of L, for example, has that many in KERS, and I know that we had some interesting times a few years ago about some of the other regional universities trying to work with them. Can you break that down just a little bit more?
I may misstate, and if I do, one of my people in the back can correct me, but U of L is not in our system.
Right. So you got 7, and do you know who those 7 is?
Eastern, Western, Northern, Kentucky State, Murray, Moorhead. Am I missing one?
So UK and U of L are not in it?
No.
anybody new in being hired in the universities, are they going to be in the Tier 3 system?
Yes.
Okay. And just the last thing, you said 2049, we will be down to where we don't have any debt, whatnot. Is that when everybody will be T3? Is that pretty much at that point?
That won't change their status. Do you mean Tier 3?
I mean, will Tier 1 and 2 filter out?
Yeah, it's kind of like...
is that what's going on with that?
Yeah. It's kind of like World War II survivors.
Yeah.
They're still around. Yep,
So
70 years later. But
say, for example, just playing with numbers, I'll be quick, sir. 100 years from now, we won't have, and unless somebody starts tinkering with this again, we'll be in pretty good shape.
Yes, we will. And that's all being paid for over the next 25, 26 years.
Okay, good. And then one last one real quick, Chairman.
Go right ahead.
So you say that KERS non-hazardous is at 18.5% funded. And what was the low point? Do you know?
12.9.
12.9.
2018.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Representative Graham. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
I just want to follow up a little bit to what my colleague just asked for. You in your early beginning, you talked about the tiers, and you also talked about the retirees, and you kind of had a comment like the retirees are leaving. Well, I guess my question to you is, what's the average age of the retirees who are in the
I would have to get back to you. It's lower than you would expect. I'll tell you that. I think one of the seaplanes, it's in the 50s. And maybe all of them approach not more than 59 or 60. I have an exhibit that has that, and I roughly in my head, but not specifically.
So remind you, I'm a history teacher and not a mathematician or an analyst in the area. But when they retire early, obviously that's hurting the system, especially within the Tier 1 area, correct? By them, because obviously if they start retiring at 48, you've got a longer period of time of which you're paying out to those retirees. Whereas if you would keep them in the system, wouldn't it help to build up somewhat what we need in terms of having more who are still working rather than more who are retired?
It should be actuarially neutral.
Okay.
So they're retiring earlier, but they're getting a smaller benefit.
Okay. Is there something that we could also do as a legislature to encourage our state employees to stay longer? And to stay, even though you said it evens out, but you also are losing, obviously, institutional knowledge when these people are leaving.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, I'm also looking at not only if it doesn't impact as well, but we're still losing some form of institutional knowledge to encourage them to stay in the system.
Is there something that could
I'm just
be done?
asking. I'm just asking you on your comments.
I think as it relates to the retirement system, I don't have an answer to that. I think the personnel cabinet is the...
Well, I understand that, but I guess what I'm saying is that we would need those individuals, but also if they continue to, you say it's a neutral thing, but it's still helping to fund the system. That's my point.
Yeah. Well, they'll be getting a larger benefit. They'll be contributing, but they'll be getting a larger benefit. I will tell you that we saw in July of 2022 a significant decline in the number of retirees, and we believe it's because 8%.
And I agree with you on
They're
that.
getting 8%. They're going to get a bigger retirement. I'm going to stick around and get the benefit of that. And now the 6% after that. So can something be done? That had an impact, a very measurable impact.
And that's exactly what I was going down,
Yeah.
to let our members know that when we do things that are geared towards encouraging our employees to stay longer, how it helps us in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have two more questions, and then we need to move on. Rep. Johnson, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 30 seconds. Back on slide 6. This is a pretty trivial question for you, but there are 3 categories of members in the program. I think it was slide 6. Yeah. You mentioned, I believe, active and retired. I don't think you mentioned inactive. Can you define what an inactive member is for us, just for
Yes.
the new members?
Yeah, it's somebody who leaves the system and has either a vested benefit or a tier 3 balance, and they leave it here.
Okay.
They're usually small amounts of money.
Yeah.
If I can say something back to Representative Graham,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm speaking only for KPPA. Being flexible in our hybrid work from home is a benefit, very definite benefit, and that's going to help us keep people in their seats for a longer period of time. No question.
Thank you. Good point. Thank you so much.
Senator Byrd, you have the last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is honestly my first day on the committee, so I'm going to ask some really basic questions, and I'm sorry about that. What is our average annual rate of return? I saw it broken down by category. Overall, average annual rate of return for the last 10 years. Where are we?
It tends to be we were in the 7 to 8% range, and you could go back 20 years and 30 years.
Okay, 7 to 8%. And when we calculate for the future, what average annual rate of return do we use for calculation purposes?
For the C, it's 6.5%, and for K, it's 5.25%.
5.25, 6.5, and we're averaging 7 to 8.
Historically.
So fairly close margins there. A little maybe too close, if you don't ever want to go under. Second question, and I'm sorry, because I should know the answer to this, but I have never honestly been able to figure it out, and I have tried over and over again. Clearly, you don't want these to be 100% funded, because then you have money sitting there, not making money, not doing anything. What goal do you want to be funded at?
100%.
Why?
At least.
I am going to allow one more question. Senator Williams, please make it brief if you can, sir.
I'll make it brief. So we're seeing a change in our workforce. My grandfather's generation, my father's generation, they had one career, one company. They may work from graduation to retirement at one place. But in the technical field that I come from for a number of years, I mean, you work 5 to 10 years at a company. And now we're seeing this new generation likes to move around their careers. They might work 10 to 20 years in one career field and change their entire career field because they're more motivated. With the pension system we have now, and as these demographics change what people want out of life, will we have, when we have employees that aren't here for their lifetime careers, but instead of moving out every 10 to 20 years, will the pension system accommodate that and be solvent?
There is, it'll be solvent. There is portability in Tier 3. If I move from here to go work for IBM, I'll take my balance from the earnings, and if I got 5 years, then I can also take.
Yeah, so portability is becoming one of the key.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Eager, thank you so much for answering all of our questions. We appreciate you being with us today, and thank you so much.
Thanks for the questions.
You're very welcome. We will move forward to Mr. Bo Barnes. Mr. Barnes, if you'll come forward at this time. And I'm not going to rush you, so you have all the time you need.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please introduce yourself for the record, and you may proceed, sir.
Yes. Good afternoon. Bo Barnes. I serve as a Deputy Executive Secretary and as General Counsel for the Teachers Retirement System.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As soon as I can. Okay. Yes. Sorry, didn't have my mic on. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I've been asked to give largely the same presentation that you just heard from KPPA with a few differences. I've been asked to make it sort of a higher level overview of the retirement system. So with that, we will begin with one of the most important pages of the entire slide.